Sports shape lives, build communities, and drive billion-dollar industries. Yet their true impact often goes unnoticed.
From personal growth and well being to career potential, it's time to rethink what sports can do. This is the Why Not Sports podcast. Welcome to the Why Not Sports podcast, a podcast where we dive into the business and community side of sports. Today, we are super honored to welcome Ryan Brauninger.
Ryan is a former college baseball player at McNeese State University. Following his playing career, he moved to College Station to pursue a master's in sports management at Texas A&M. Since earning his degree, Ryan's been deeply involved in youth sports across the Brazos Valley and beyond, including a summer stint at USA Baseball. He joined TexAgs in August of 2015 and serves as a recruiting and baseball analyst, providing in-depth coverage of Texas A&M's baseball and football recruiting efforts. Additionally, Ryan is a high school director for Texas 12 Baseball and College Station, where he mentors and develops young athletes aiming for collegiate success.
So, Brauny, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. This is really cool what y'all are doing.
I appreciate it. And Brauny, kind of the first question that we like starting with and kind of our icebreaker is, what's your sports story?
So just like everybody else that I think gets involved in sports at a professional level, they had either some love through just watching or some love of playing growing up. I was both. I grew up on Sports Center when it was cool, like way before what it is now, where it was nothing but ESPN was highlights all day long. Baseball Tonight was something that was on our TV every night in my house. Played in a very competitive setting growing up in Southeast Texas, small town, where wearing your hometown across your chest came with a lot of pride.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of bragging rights that were to be had in travel ball, in Little League, in Pee Wee football. Everything you did, you were kind of representing your hometown. So that was really cool. And I attribute a lot of my competitive nature to those settings and to those coaches that I had in those early settings where, I mean, I was 12 years old and we're playing against Port Neches Groves, which is one of the biggest rivalries in the state of Texas. And I mean, there were 1,000 people there at a 12-year-old game. So like, you just kind of grow up in that environment and you just kind of get eat up with the atmosphere and how much it matters to certain people. And so about that time in my life, I decided that I wanted to be as good as I could at some sport. I didn't know what it was at that young. And as I grew and developed, I ended up being pretty good at baseball. I played football as well, but had some injuries that just kind of directed me down the baseball path. I was lucky enough to get a chance to play in college and went to junior college for a year at Hill College in Hillsboro, Texas. We called it the Harvard on the Hill. It was not Harvard on the Hill. It did not challenge me academically. I was kind of a high academic kid growing up. And then out of there, though, I played 1 year there and then had some offers and chose to go to McNeese State in Lake Charles, Louisiana to finish my baseball career. Was okay there. I wasn't a great player. If I was any good, I'd have played for longer than I did. But had a decent career there, ended up with some accolades. But when I got done, I had opportunities overseas that, now I'm looking back at it so many years ago, 15 years ago, I wish I would have taken. But I didn't. I'd grown up in an Aggie household. Dad went to A&M, uncle went to A&M. Everybody around me were Aggies. I grew up going to bonfires and cotton bowls and all those kind of things. And so like A&M had always kind of had this place in my heart as an A&M fan. And so when I got done playing at McNeese, I took a year off to try to decide what I was going to do with the rest of my life and really prayed on it. And God pointed me in the direction of trying to go get an advanced degree, an advanced education. I applied to one school, and it was Texas A&M. And luckily enough, I got in. And so started pursuing my master's in sports management there. Didn't know what realm of sports I wanted to go into, whether it be broadcasting or potentially like sports agencies, stuff like that. Sport marketing. I really didn't know. And then when I started working with 12 baseball here locally, and I kind of got a feel for what TexAgs was and what I thought it would grow into, that was kind of my goal. And I got down to where rock bottom and had no really stable job other than the part-time stuff with 12. Had interviewed with TexAgs 2 or 3 times, and each time they wanted part-time work, I was looking for full-time work. So it never really like coalesced at the same time where it was the right opportunity for me to go into part-time work. And then, man, I can remember 2014, 2015, I was looking at jobs in North Houston because there was nothing for me in College Station. And I hated it because the place felt like home. And I'd drawn such a huge connection to the community through 12 baseball. And Billy Lucci called me one day. Hey, say we got this full-time recruiting gig opened up, and we'll let you cover baseball if you're interested. So went interviewed, and that was in 2015, and kind of the rest is history. But I love sports growing up. I thought I was going to be a sports broadcaster when I was real young. I would watch Stuart Scott and Dan Patrick and all those guys, Brian Anderson, that were the guys on Sports Center. And so I kind of had a passion for it from a very early age. And I'm lucky. I'm extremely blessed because my brain does one thing. Like I'm awful I can't fix cars. I'm terrible with like finances. I had a guy meet with me today about my stocks and stuff. I'm like, you're speaking a different language. I'm not good at math. My brain does one thing, and it's sports. So I'm extremely blessed and lucky and humbled that I get to work in that arena where my brain functions. I don't have to go out and do something completely out of the ordinary or outside of my mental capacity, at least in my opinion.
For sure. So kind of just following up on that briefly, how would you answer the question, why not sports, for young people looking to kind of follow in your footsteps, pursuing a career in the wide variety of opportunities that sports has to offer?
Yeah, so in my experience, like if you're looking for reasons not to do it, at least starting off, the pay is not going to be great. If you're looking to make a big dent in in your financial, in your checking account, or make a big gain, it's probably not there early on. Now, there are avenues to get there, but it's going to take you a little bit. Number two is that the hours, man. Like, there's nothing, I tell people all the time, I don't have a 9 to 5. But if this phone rings, and even when I'm talking to y'all, if this phone rings and it says certain names on it, you answer it. And however long that takes you to answer it, get the information you need, process it, do what you need to do with it, that's your working hours. So my wife got real tired of it over the summer during the baseball coaching search.
Oh, yeah.
Where it was ringing at 11 o'clock, sometimes midnight. But if it said certain people's names on it, you got to answer. So if you're looking for like a set structure and you're wanting to have your employment be a set structured, in terms of hours and day, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, this ain't that. So you better be flexible and you better be good at communicating with people, whether it be through email, through Zoom, through phone calls, through text. You better be really consistent because I tell people all the time, I'm in the information business. I deal in information. So information can quickly become old, right? So if you are not around to communicate and respond to people, your sources, to give you information about whatever, you're going to be late and you're going to get beat. And then that is kind of how you can kind of fall into this lackadaisical thing. Well, oh, it's just a text from so-and-so, I can answer it later. But what I found is even if it's a text I could answer later, I'm better off answering it now because it gets me in that habit. So there are some real, I wouldn't say they're not challenges. They're just like hurdles that you'd have to get over to work in this industry. And then if you're talking about like the coaching side of it, whether it be club volleyball or travel baseball, travel softball, soccer, any of it, and this is the part that people don't want to hear, is the hardest part's the parents. The kids are great. But dealing with the parents is typically the reason why an experience with any of those sports turns sour for families.
Absolutely. And kind of for you, like taking a step back, like what does it mean for you to be working in the sports industry, like having such big dreams at a young age of working in some sort of like sports media role?
Yeah. So it's funny enough, I was just talking to my wife. I was fortunate enough, Coach Early let me emceed their preseason banquet. And I was talking to my wife, I didn't play at Texas A&M, I played at McNeese, but I grew up going to Texas A&M baseball camps from the time I was 9 until I was 14, 15 years old. And, there was a time in my life where R.C. Slocum, when he was the head football coach at A&M, was like king. Like I was young kid and like he was the head coach at Texas A&M. Well, now I've gotten to know Mike Elko on a really personal level. So like if I got great relationships with the head baseball coach and the head football coach at Texas A&M, if I went back and told my 12-year-old self that, they'd be giddy, like they'd go nuts. So it is cool to look back at things like that and the relationships and the people you get to meet, the hands you get to shake. That is a cool part of this industry, and it's no different than building your Rolodex of connections, whether it be in the business world, the engineering world, whatever it is. You got to start building connections. Life's about relationship. The things, the material things, they'll come and go, but life is about building relationships, and the more relationships and quality relationships you can build, especially especially in the sports industry, the more beneficial it is.
Yeah.
So kind of adding on to that topic of relationships, how do you balance relationships when you're covering athletes, kind of from the perspective of needing to provide an objective evaluation, but also, looking to maintain positive relationships with coaches and players?
That's a great question. And I think a lot of former athletes fight that, not just in local media, but national media. And you think about what comes to mind for me is kind of how many times Charles Barkley's gotten in hot water with current NBA players because he doesn't care and he lets it fly. But I think with what I do, the kids know that I'm looking out for them. And I'm being as genuine as possible as I can with them in my relationships. I think me having been a coach and still coaching kids that are of the caliber of players that we have at 12 baseball, where they go to A&M, Texas, TCU, LSU, and compete, I understand how hard it is for them to be successful at this level. And I understand how big of a challenge it is to go from the high school athletic scene to the college athletic scene. It's the biggest jump in an athlete's career. When you look at the lifespan of an athlete, the biggest change is from high school to college. It's not from college to the pros. It's from high school to college, because in high school, you guys know, like, sure, you went to school with some guys that were elite athletes in high school, and they get to college and they're just another guy. Well, that is a physical pressure, but it's even more so a huge mental challenge that you have to overcome. So I understand that as well as anybody, I think, that's covering collegiate baseball. And so, like, in my analysis, I try to always build that in. And I think the kids know that. And I think when they listen, I don't ever think I'm unjust or unfair to them. And I'm always open to it. Like, we talk about, our relationship with athletes is super important. And so I want them to feel like or Coach Early to feel like if he doesn't like something I said, or if I'm way off base, he can call, we can talk about it.
Absolutely. And how does that change, like, from sport to sport? Is it different between baseball and football? Like, kind of how is that dynamic different for different sports here at A&M?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's important to know is what you don't know. I'm a baseball guy that got flung into the football world. Now, I've done it long enough. I've been around enough really highly competent football people where I've gotten to sit and listen and learn some things that will help my evaluations or my analysis on the football side. But comparatively to baseball, I'm nowhere close in terms of what my eyes see, what my brain says, and then what comes out of my mouth. Baseball, it's like second nature, right? I've just done it for so long, watched it so long, been around so many high-level people. Football, it took me a little bit to get there. So I would say that's how it differs, is me understanding, like, hey, like, I don't know as much about football. I could be wrong with either my analysis on a kid, my take on a situation, how coaches should handle it. Baseball, I feel like I'm a little bit closer. I'm not always right, and I learned at an early age with the game of baseball. As soon as you think you got it figured out, it'll humble you very quickly. But I think that would be the main difference for me, like through my lens, is that I know what I don't know with football.
Absolutely. And kind of something that you mentioned earlier, all careers are kind of about your network, right? Like people you know. And a university did a study on the most successful CEOs in the past 20 years. And one thing that they found was that these people typically had a mentor that they trusted a lot and that they learned a lot from. Kind of you, like early on in your career, do you have a specific mentor or set of mentors that really like guided your path or helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I think, I'm lucky enough to say that my dad has been a huge mentor. Both of my grandfathers filled me with so much wisdom as well. I grew up in a household where, like, the men are very stoic and wise and measured with their decision making and measured with their tongue. And so, like, I always admired that and took that from them. But professionally, I think Kevin Hodge, who runs the 12 Baseball Academy, there's not many better humans on the planet than that guy. And he's taught me so much about travel baseball side, the business side. He's taught me so much about walking in his faith. He's taught me so much about how to be a family man, just everything. Like he's just been such a great mentor to not only me, but a lot of the guys that coach in our academy. And if you're asking me personally how 12 has gone from when I started with 12 in 2010, I think we had like maybe 10 total teams, and they were just out of College Station, now into one of, if not the biggest baseball academy in the state of Texas, with branches in Corpus, San Antonio, Katy, and the Woodlands. It's because of Kevin Hodge and his vision for the thing and how he viewed it as kind of a discipleship more than anything. And so Kevin Hodge has been an incredible mentor for me in my life. And then obviously Billy Lucci. Like me and Billy have a very, we like to pick at each other on air and stuff a lot. And even in our private text messages, we kind of joke with each other. But the truth be told, I have a lot of the stuff that I have and a lot of connections that I have because of Billy Lucci and him taking a chance on me 10 years ago now to come on in full time and be an analyst with TexAgs. So again, like, I'm just extremely, extremely fortunate that I've had role models at home growing up. And then I've got great
Yeah.
mentors in my, both of my professional. I haven't done a bunch of job hop, and that's, as I'm in my late 30s now, like there are guys that I grew up with that are on job number 5 or 6 as they just kind of bounce around and look for something that's right. And I'm just extremely lucky and blessed that I've been around so many good people.
And kind of tying that back to football, I think one thing that you mentioned is kind of the importance of mentorship and the importance of continuity kind of in terms of your development. How do you think that relates to current state of college athletics with the average FBS coaching tenure being 3.6 years? So kind of, a revolving door for a lot of programs around the country. How do you think that has taken a toll on college players' development?
Yeah, from 10 years ago when I started in this business, what it is now is almost unrecognizable. And what has happened is everybody's picked up one of these things, right? And we live in now this microwave society where everything has to happen right now, whether that be development of a player, success for a coach, and his coaching staff, success on the recruiting trail, all comes down like everybody thinks it's got to happen right now. As this era of college athletics goes on, we're learning that there's value in being old as a player, like having an older roster, and then there's value in bringing up your players that you recruited. And you've got to get it, obviously there's some level of this where the coach has to win enough to stay around longer than that 3.6 years you mentioned. But the reason why that has happened is like the money involved if you win is just so great, right? And everybody is putting pressure on themselves to I guess either reach a pinnacle that they've never reached before or maintain the level that they're currently at. And so there's a lot of pressure on all these decisions that are made in terms of roster building, obviously scouting and game planning and game decision. But there's still going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but look at the teams that were in the college football playoff. If you go team by team, look how old they are and look at the percentage of the players that they recruited, not out of the portal, that they got out of high school, that were making huge impacts for them. I think we are starting to learn that you can supplement your roster through transfer portal.
Yeah.
NIL obviously helps with that, but you better be recruiting high school players and developing your players. That's still a massive, massive piece to the puzzle.
Yeah, and then kind of just adding on to that development and pressure, kind of looking at more of an athlete standpoint. I know you have a lot of good relationships with several athletes across campus within all sports. How do you think their pressure has changed with growing responsibilities from NIL commitments, potential brand deals, and all the kind of additional constraints and demands that are arising from sports, from academics, and from, all the outside noise?
Yeah, it's certainly added to their plate. Now they are being compensated, some of them greatly compensated, for being high-end college athletes, and I'm for that. I think kids, if you are making a profit for the university, or there are local businesses, companies that want to use you to promote their product, I'm all in for what name and image and likeness should be. No question. I'm all in on that. But with that, obviously comes a little bit more pressure. You're kind of treated through the lens of the public, through the lens of the fan bases now. As these guys are getting paid, they're professionals, we can be more critical of them. Whereas before NIL had taken such a hold, I think people were a little bit, coaches would draw the brunt of the ire of fan bases because they were professionals. They were being paid handsomely, produce wins or losses, or produce wins. And so I think the players have now seen a little bit more of a taste of that. Again, that's where social media and all the I was actually talking about Jace Lavalette, for instance, today on TexAgs Live, and it's not easy for Jace whenever he opens up his phone, and whether it's Instagram or Twitter or TikTok, there's his face. And it's being tweeted by Major League Baseball. And he's got Instagram posts from Baseball America with, #1 overall draft prospect going into the season. That's not easy to deal with. It takes some real mental fortitude to be able to see all that, process it, and then when you go play, not have that lingering in the back of your mind. Oh, I have to get a hit here, or I might drop, my draft grade might drop. He's got to kind of flush all that and just go play the game that he's known that he loves since he was 9-10 years old, and he's really good at. So I think that kind of stuff, there's a lot of added pressure that comes with it. And I just think overall these college athletes now are facing a little bit more of that than they were a decade ago.
Yeah, and so kind of going off of that, what's your biggest piece of advice to athletes when they come in as freshmen or redshirt freshmen, right? What is the thing that you kind of advise them on, hey, look out for this, or this is going to happen at some point in your tenure here, just this is how you navigate it.
I think two things that we always tell our players coming out of 12, right? Everybody's timeline is different. Just because you see something happening for your peers doesn't mean you're supposed to be doing that at that time. Your timeline, how you develop when your opportunity comes, is going to be different. Don't worry about that. It's hard. It's easy to say. It's really, really hard to do, especially when you see opportunities for the guys around you happening before you. Number two, keep the main thing the main thing. So all this NIL stuff, and you have to talk about it now. But and let's just take you guys. You guys are wanting to go into business. If you go into business and you sign a contract with a company for X amount of dollars, and then you decide, I'm going to show up to work late. I'm not going to give great effort. I'm not going to be super attentive in meetings. Guess what happens? You lose your money. So guess what happens to these college athletes? No matter what you think you're worth coming in, if you're not really, really good at what you do, so you show up on time, you're great in the weight room, you're a great teammate, you're great in the locker room, you don't miss assignments, you go to class, you don't miss training sessions, all that stuff. If you do all that and you play well, then the NIL comes. It's not the other way around. Because if you show up and you don't, and you're a problem in the locker room, in the clubhouse, you miss weights, you miss team dinner, you miss all this stuff, and then you don't play well on Saturdays or whatever day you play, nobody wants to pay you any money. So the two biggest factors that we tell our kids is be comfortable with your timeline, work while you wait. Right? If you've got to wait to play, work while you wait, so that you're prepared to play when your opportunity comes, and keep the main thing the main thing. What got you there is going to keep you there.
I really like what you hit on with the timeline. How have you seen that timeline evolve over time, especially with the introduction of NIL and more high school players choosing to come to college baseball over the MLB?
Well, one thing the NCAA did that I thought was very wise, and I don't say that very often about decisions made by the NCAA, is that for baseball now, you cannot be contacted as a recruit until August 1st of your junior year. Baseball recruiting at one point was being done on 8th and 9th graders, and so much can change between 14 and 15-year-olds, and by the time they're 17 and 18, where you saw schools making finance or scholarship offers to kids that they were the best they ever were at 14 years old. Vice versa now, we have seen high school recruiting for 17 and 18-year-olds take a major, major hit due to the transfer portal, the NCAA allowing extra years of eligibility. But by them pushing back that contact date to August 1st of the junior year when you're in high school, they have allowed more evaluations to take place. So you're not seeing these kind of willy-nilly offers and commitments that don't make a lot of sense by the time signing day rolls around. They're making more clean, clear, efficient evaluations at the high school level now. But we have some of the best players in the Brazos Valley that play for us that are going to Blinn College to play. Just because that's kind of how far down the rung the high school player sits for a lot of colleges now. Like if you're not a Gavin Grahovic or a Jay Slavolette, like one of these unicorns, you're better off going somewhere where you're going to play because like your clock's starting as soon as you hit the dirt. And if you're going to get buried on a depth chart and then over-recruited through the transfer portal, when are you going to play? So, and I think a lot of colleges are looking at it that way too. Like, let's go get our 8 to 10 elite high school guys, hope they don't sign in the major league draft, and then we will supplement whatever we miss on through the transfer portal.
Yeah, for sure. So then kind of looking bigger picture at that, how do you think that kind of the increase in talent is going to increase the marketability of college baseball?
Well, I think we are in the golden age of college baseball for a lot of reasons. The MLB draft being shortened, the elimination of a lot of minor league clubs throughout minor league baseball and then we still have COVID guys hanging around that are getting extra years of eligibility. The NCAA seems not to want to put their foot down on anything in regards to eligibility. I mean, we got guys going to D2s that were once ineligible that are transferring back to D1s and finding themselves eligible. And it seems like all you have to do to get around an NCAA bylaw now is just file a lawsuit. Like there's major changes in that arena, but I don't know where this is going. Like I don't know where Pandora's box finally closes, but they've got to do it. So to me, it's a difficult answer to your question, right? Because we just, without giving me some kind of guarantee about what the future of the sport is going to look like, and as the precedent keeps coming down in favor of the player, who's there to govern anything that happens?
Absolutely. And Brauny, we're going to give you the best question in sports right now, especially in the college landscape. We're going to give you the commissioner hat and see if you were commissioner, NCAA, you can decide whether just focus on baseball or like broadly like college athletics. What are 2 to 3 changes that you would make that you think would generally be good for the sport, the development of the sport, like moving it forward, but also for the athletes and like being mindful for their development?
Yeah, so if I'm going to say these, you got to understand that I don't think any of them can be implemented because of the last point I just made.
Yeah.
Because as soon as the NCAA would try to enforce these bylaws, somebody would just sue, and the precedent says courts are going to come down in favor of the player. So that's the preface for what I'm about to say. Number one, reinstate the transfer port. If you transfer, you have to sit out a year. Reinstate that. Unless you've graduated, if you transfer as an undergrad, you have to sit out a year. That would be where I would start. I think that would curtail a lot of the player movement that we're seeing currently. Number two, I think that you should have some sort of time period before you can cash one NIL check at your current school. If it's 24 months, 30 months, whatever it is. Now, you can accrue as much money as you want. So if you're Bryce Underwood and you're going to Michigan and they're giving you $3 million up front, that's fine. You have that $3 million in an account, but you don't get access to it until you've been on campus for X amount of months. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that would also incentivize kids to stay where they're at, because I think it would still be classified as anecdotal evidence. It's not hard evidence because the sample size isn't big enough. But right now, the anecdotal evidence really comes down in favor of you sticking where you're at and developing where you're at. So I think kids are going to reach their full potential more if they'll just be patient and sit where they're at and develop. So I would implement rules that would keep those guys incentivized staying where you're at and working through whatever hardships you may have early on. Because there's a financial benefit at the end. And then if you want to leave, you've got to sit out a year. And I think that would play a role in some decision making as well.
No, yeah, that's a great point. And I guess as we're transitioning to the end of our episode, we want to end on some like guidelines, right, for aspiring kids who want to go into sports media, sports athletics. Like, how would you differentiate between like big national media and local, right? I mean, you're a prime example of somebody who like thrives in this environment, right? Like, how would you advocate for like other sorts of like local media and especially in the sports, right?
Yeah, I think it will depend on the personality of the human being going into the field, right? What are your aspirations? I found a place that felt like home to me, and I didn't want to leave because it felt like home. That's what's kind of kept me local more than anything. My wife and I have a home in South College Station. We love the community here. I'm involved with, obviously 12 baseball keeps me very involved with the community, and I love the people. But, there may be people that are guys or girls getting into the sports industry that they got big dreams of the bright lights in the big city. Go chase that. My advice, though, is wherever you think that you see yourself going, whatever your career path, whatever you have mapped out in your head, you don't get there by saying no. So what we tell a lot of our interns at TexAgs is like, be present for stuff. If a supervisor that's outside of your department needs help with something, go do that. If you have an opportunity to travel with your supervisor to a sporting event, but you may miss class or a test, guess what you do? You miss the class, you miss the test. And I know it's really hard for you guys in your mold, and both of you seem like super sharp kids. I know that it's hard in your brain to think, I miss a test. What happens if I get a bad grade? I promise you, the grade you're going to get on that test is not going to determine whether you get a job or not. But that life experience that you may live by going out and saying yes to an opportunity could open a door for you to get a job down the line. But I tell this story quite a bit. So it was 2015. I mentioned I was looking at jobs elsewhere. And my grandfather, before he passed, gave me some of the greatest piece of wisdom I've ever heard. He said, if you chase money your whole life, you'll never find home. He said, find a place that feels like home and see if you can make your money work there. And so like that really stuck with me. And so I was doing all I could because, dude, I'm telling you, I remember the exact gas station in Bryan, Texas, where I had to pull in, and I was pulling pennies out of my ashtray to pay for gas because I just needed to get to the next day when my check came from 12. But I was out of money, zero money in my bank account. zero money in my checking account, too much pride to call mom and dad and say I need help. And I was at the end, man. Like I was going to have to leave this place that felt like home because I just couldn't make my money work here. And it wasn't 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later that Billy Lucci called with this opportunity. And so like that is something far beyond me, right? Like I couldn't have done that. Like there's a higher power at play here. So I never go into a week of work not appreciative of what the opportunity I've been given and like how it was kind of bestowed upon me. And so to me, that was my turning point moment. Was just, I mean, I was at the end of my rope here, and there's like, you don't know what would have happened had Lucci never picked up that phone. I could be selling copiers and printers and fax machines in the Woodlands, Texas, for all I know. You know, like my life could be very, very different. But I stuck with it because the people here, and outside the university is great. It's life-changing. Texas A&M was life-changing for me. But this community of people is what I fell in love with. And I didn't want to leave a community where I felt people they really cared and they did stuff right. And so that's why I kind of stuck through it and tried to break in here locally. But that was my turning point moment.
No, that's excellent advice. Thank you so much.
Brauny, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate hearing about your story. Truly inspirational. And we really think that our listeners are going to be able to get a lot of key takeaways from this, whether around the sports world as a whole or kind of trying to break in, making a career out of it. So kind of we want to finish by passing the mic back to you. How our listeners can stay connected to the work that you're doing, you know, personally on TexAgs, and kind of learn more.
Yeah, so I would just advise you to follow all TexAgs on all social media. Obviously, I have my social media pages as well, art_Brauninger. I do most of my work on Twitter. And then I know that if you are a student at Texas A&M, you can read our premium content for free. Now, that was one of the more brilliant business moves that our owners came up with a few years ago, because once you guys get kind of hooked on the premium information, you guys go out in the job world and you're like, man, at $12 a month, I'd like to throw that toward TexAgs, and you become subscribers. So it was a pretty good marketing and business move by our owners. But for most folks listening to this, they'll have an understanding of what TexAgs is. And the media space is changing as rapidly almost as college sports is changing, and podcasting has become a massive deal. So we're always looking for new ways, new ideas, new lines of thinking that can help our business out. So like what you guys are doing is outstanding. For people listening, they don't know this. These two reached out like cold. I never met these guys before. They found my email. They shot me an email. It was extremely professional, respectful, and well written. And that's why I wanted to come on and help these two. So Joaquin and Enzo are on their way to doing something big. And I'm just going to say, if y'all do something together that blows up, you have my email, my contact, right? I'll be a ground floor investor. You guys let me know what you got.
No, that means a lot, Brauny. I mean,
Yes, sir. Thank
we're
you very
super
much.
impressed. Yeah, that means a lot. And I guess that wraps up our episode here. We're really appreciative of your time. And I mean, just one more thing that we wanted to give you the chance to do is, obviously we're at Texas A&M. Like, anyone you want to send good bull out to, you know, professor or a student athlete.
I'd shout out Greg Bennett in the Department of Sport Management, Dr. Greg Bennett. He was a big mentor of mine in the department. And then just the student body. Get to Olson Field this weekend. It's going to be cold. Get to Olson Field the remainder of the spring. And again, like, go do stuff. Don't sit in the dorm. Don't sit at home. Go do stuff. Say yes to stuff. And just see what the relationships you can build out of it.
No, thank you so much, sir. And we really appreciate you. Thank you for your time.